military.
Look, in 50 years, all this history is going to be condensed.
Sure.
And in my opinion, there's going to be a historian going, it all started at Charlottesville.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In which case, we're in it. Just because you don't see people out in the streets now doesn't mean we're not in it.
Now, before we get started, I want to give a quick shout out to today's sponsor, VirtualShield. They have what they say is the best VPN deal in the world. 3 years of online security for only $99. That's $2.75 per month. Now, a VPN is a virtual private network. This is a service that can keep your browsing history private. They encrypt your internet data so your online activity is out of sight of your internet service provider and any creepy snoopers. Because believe it or not, from the government to corporations, and yes, even hackers, people are trying to steal your data. Don't believe me? Head over to Google and type in buy SSN and DOB online. And you will find that there are many websites claiming to sell social security numbers and your date of birth to the highest bidder. Security software, it's not perfect, but it is a simple layer of defense that can help keep you safe. So I really do recommend you head over to virtualshield.com/deals/timcast and get your free 30-day trial today to help protect yourself online.
All this week, I have been seeing tons of rhetoric about the coming second civil war. There are people talking about how we're already in a civil war and how we're just not seeing violence yet, but we actually have seen violence in some capacity. We've seen at least one politician say, you know, we're going to have these incidents reminiscent of the actual civil war take place soon, and then it's on. There was an article from Splinter News. This website used to be called Fusion, and this is a company I worked at. And this article is called This Is Just the Beginning, where they say things are about to get more extreme, and it should. And then they go on to talk about how there were thousands of bombings in the United States in the 70s, and I have to wonder what they mean by that. So we're seeing all this rhetoric, we're seeing YouTube videos, we're seeing article after article talking about a coming civil war, but then we're seeing all this extreme rhetoric from the left about, you know, abolishing ICE. It seems like whether or not the conversation is about civil war, there are things happening from death threats to shootings to just extreme politics that make me feel like the U.S. might be destabilizing. But that's what we're going to talk about today. So for those that aren't familiar, my name is Tim Poole, and joining me today is
Emily Molly. I'm a journalist.
And Reactor, I'm a satirist.
So I guess we can start with maybe the most egregious example. Should we start with This Is Just the Beginning?
Sure.
Do you have that pulled up?
I do.
So I don't know if you want to just grab a couple excerpts, maybe like the part where it's saying it should get more extreme, and then we can start.
The second to last paragraph says, "This is all going to get more extreme, and it should. We are living in extreme times. The harm that is being done to all of us by the people and the American government is extreme."
So this is a news article inciting a civil war.
That's what it feels like to me.
They're literally saying it should happen.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, the more that people talk about it, I mean, even this podcast we're doing is going to be guilty of it. Because people are going to hear it. It's going to get in their minds. People are going to have itchy trigger fingers. You know, there are a lot of people who are like, bring on the Civil War, you know. One side's got 8 trillion bullets, and the other side can't figure out which bathroom to use. That's the argument they're using. But what I try telling people is, I'm like, we're not talking about right now, in the blink of an eye, people going out in the streets and shooting each other. We're talking about there are people getting elected, right? So there's a coming blue wave, they're saying. Maybe not, I don't know. But what happens when someone who is far left does get elected and then starts giving orders, signing, you know, executive orders or something like that, that is extreme. You know, you don't know which side is going to be which, and there's not going to be just two factions fighting. It's going to be split, pretty heavily among many different ideologies, you know?
I think there's more to this article. I mean, they were mostly talking about Kirstjen Nielsen getting harassed in a Mexican restaurant. And in that same paragraph, they go on to say, "The day will come sooner than you all think when Trump administration officials will look back fondly on the time when all they had to worry about was getting hollered at a Mexican restaurant. When you aggressively fuck with people's lives, you should not be surprised when they decide to fuck with yours." You're
going to have to bleep that.
Yeah.
They're talking about messing with illegal immigrants' lives?
I think everybody. Mm. Yeah, this is what's crazy. The average person in America doesn't think we should just allow anyone to randomly enter the country.
Right.
Yet, we have seen Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Democratic Socialist who just won in New York's Congressional District number 14, and one of her platforms is abolish ICE. Okay, ICE is immigrations and customs enforcement. Now, on her website, she does acknowledge that INS existed before ICE, right? So a lot of people are going, oh, but ICE only existed for 15 years. And it's like, right, but it used to be INS. They just changed the name and brought it from the Department of Justice to Homeland Security. We've had immigration controls in this country. Even Obama, campaigned on hard controls for immigration. So did Hillary Clinton. But now we've got people saying, no, just open borders, like no ICE. And now you have Bill de Blasio, and now you have, Kristen Gillibrand, who are now speaking up saying, yeah, we need to abolish ICE.
Well, they're not calling it for total abolition. And
So
I
it's
think
just
I think the
rhetoric.
the article is pretty misleading too. I mean, for the most part, I think Gillibrand, Mark Hoboken, who is a Democrat in Wisconsin, and Elizabeth Warren want to reform ICE and rework it, what it actually can do, and separate the criminal justice from the actual immigration.
Yeah, that's meaningless. Like, it's rhetoric. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They want to latch onto the rhetoric of the far left, abolish ICE, because the protesters are saying that. The protesters aren't getting specific about what that means. They're marching they marched in D.C., I think, just the other day, holding up signs saying no borders,
I was gonna say
abolish
that.
ICE. Like, their signs flat out say no borders. So when I hear a politician saying, yeah, we should abolish ICE, and then they, murmur to themselves under the microphone, oh, we're talking about reforming immigration. Yeah, that's rhetoric. They don't really want to do anything. I think we do need to curtail executive authority, but we're not heading in that direction. None of these politicians are going to do it. And the only alternative is like the Democratic Socialists of America, people like Cortez, who are just like, abolish ICE.
So
Right.
in the history of the world, have there ever been any countries that were successful without borders?
I don't know.
I mean, that wouldn't be a country technically.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I'm not a historian on past civilizations and things, but I was talking to a bunch of occupiers about one simple reason why anarchist societies don't work. Why the further left libertarian you go, the less likely you are to survive. Think about it this way: you have one city, you have a country, and they're totally democratic, left libertarian. Everybody votes. And they get word through a scout that a barbarian is about to raid their city. Okay, well, they have to vote and decide on what to do, who to mobilize, and how to do it. And as a libertarian society, people aren't forced to serve in the military. There's no strong border protections. And then you have that barbarian horde, which is authoritarian, where the one guy says, everyone do what I say or I'll chop your head off. And they do it.
And while the Democrats are all voting, the
Right,
barbarians
exactly.
are already attacking them.
And so the problem is, the people who live in the barbarian society, it's a terrible, terrible way to live. To be forced to do things you don't want to do. And the democratic society is awesome, So there has to be some kind of balance where we want to avoid authoritarianism and allow people to live freely and peacefully, but we don't want to be so weak that we get overrun and people just flood in and destroy everything we have. So, basically the point I'm trying to make is when we're talking about the Civil War, it seems like I watched this video and it talked about how a civil war isn't necessarily what people imagine it is, because people assume it's like two factions shooting each other and there's battlefields everywhere.
Right.
But it's also the idea that there are two factions who can't decide on how the government is being run, and they're fighting over control, political control. And we sort of have that. We've got the left today saying the election was illegitimate. It shouldn't count. It's wrong. And you've got an active investigation against Trump. And you can agree or disagree. I'm not saying one's right or one's wrong, but then you have the other side saying he legitimately won, he is the president. So you have basically the formations of two factions saying we completely disagree on what is going on in this country and how it should function. Then you have Trump, whose rhetoric on immigration is not too far off from like Barack Obama's or Hillary Clinton's. Hillary Clinton called for a border barrier, and now the family separation policy was extreme. So what's the alternative? Abolish ICE, no borders. Like, which extreme are you going to pick?
I don't know if either of those extremes are going to have enough power to shift into a civil war.
What do you mean?
Like the people who are saying abolish ICE and who would want to get rid of it, they're not going to have the power to actually make that happen. When the average American citizen does want some kind of enforcement of borders.
Well, so we can look at it this way. We could argue we're already in a civil war because we have two factions arguing over what is or is not legitimate.
Yeah,
Right.
The beginning of Civil War, because
Yeah, I
all
wouldn't
wars
call it a
start
war.
slowly. None of them are. I mean, there are
So
some where
so
instant
what
attacks,
so
but
what if people are only throwing pies at each other? Is it not a what would you call it?
an escalation.
No, but I mean, if you have two factions and one side saying that is not my president, he did not win, he did not have the popular vote, he is not the
Oh,
president.
that's called a truce.
And then right. So what we're no, but the point is, at what point will we know when the Civil War started?
When there's more, I'd say when there's more,
Recruitment.
yeah,
Well,
recruitment and
military
conflict.
No.
Military
Look, in
recruitment.
50 years, all this history is going to be condensed.
Sure.
And in my opinion, there's going to be a historian going, it all started at Charlottesville.
Yeah.
In which case, we're in it. Just because you don't see people out in the streets now doesn't mean we're not in it.
Yeah, because there's going to
We've
be
already had.
a gently defining factor.
I mean, all last year we had street battles. People bashing each other over the skulls with bike locks. A guy ramming into a crowd of people with a car.
Yeah, but we
people
haven't
showing up with guns.
We haven't seen it as intense since then, though.
We have
Yes,
seen
we've had street battles.
Yeah,
Have we had,
yeah,
have
but-
we had in
political
the
but not
Northwest?
not as
political
often.
massacres.
Like what?
Like someone went somewhere shooting and it
Oh, the
was all
Scalise baseball game.
Yeah.
So it's like
But a couple crazy lone wolves isn't going to
that's how it
mobilize
starts.
an entire
They
movement.
plant the seed and then
what do you mean
Sure, they'll
mobilize an
plant
entire
the
movement? There
seed.
are movements already.
Sure, okay. But I'm talking about, like, specifically the baseball game. That was one dude who was kind of off his rocker.
Yep.
yeah, and that's how it starts.
Right.
One dude off his rocker plants the idea into someone else's head, like, yeah, I like what the guy was thinking.
Yeah. How many people are in this country?
Lots.
320 million.
Yeah. Right. What percentage of those people are required to destabilize the entire country?
Well, I guess it kind of comes down to the people who are, I wouldn't say leading the movement, but are like people like James Woods with what he tweeted, Maxine Walters with what she said about.
Well, what did they say? She said if you see
If you
any
see them
member of his cabinet
at a
out,
department store, at a
push
restaurant,
back on them,
yeah.
form a crowd, basically saying protest these people.
And in response, James Woods tweeted that now that a United States Congresswoman has called for harassment against Republicans and the inevitable violence that will come of it, I urge you all to A, get armed, and B, vote. Your life literally depends on it. And that's a tweet that got a lot of circulation.
And a writer for the Los Angeles Times contacted Mike Cernovich and said, I hope you're first against the wall.
Oh yeah, he lost his job for that, right?
Right, that writer lost their job because of it. But the point is, the rhetoric is there, and this is a writer for the LA Times, a freelancer. But the point is, we saw that there was a reporter for, I think it was for the Republican, I'm not sure, who, for God knows why, tweeted that the Annapolis shooter dropped his MAGA hat before killing 4 people. There was no this was a lie. This is a straight up lie from a journalist. And apparently the editor caught this and made him delete the tweet, and the guy got fired, and he had to apologize for it. But that story's so crazy to me. Why would a journalist straight up lie like that? And he claims he's a centrist. I'm like, what drove a person to falsely claim that this shooting in Annapolis was from a Trump supporter?
Did he think he was being funny?
Don't know. It wasn't a joke.
He was trying to make it viral article, maybe.
Maybe he was trying to make something viral. I don't know. But the point is,
dumb.
we know journalists do this. A writer contacted Cernovich and said, I hope you're first against the wall. That's literally a reference to the Soviet Union taking dissidents and putting them up against the wall and shooting them. Mm-hmm. Right. So these are far leftists. So the point I was making earlier, how many people are in this country, and what percent is required to actually destabilize everything?
Well, it's actually, I think it's interesting.
You pulled up the number?
Well, there's a number, according to a Rasmussen poll, of how many people think that civil war is imminent.
Okay.
And that's 31%.
31% of people think civil war is imminent.
Yeah.
Let's do some math real quick. How many people live in New York City?
Oh, wait, not just imminent, but imminent within the next 5 years.
There was an article last year in the New Yorker where several security experts were polled. Some of them said there was a 5% chance, some said a 95% chance, but the aggregate was around 35%. So it's not surprising that we're seeing around 31% who feel like a civil war is imminent in the next 5 years. But let's do some math. This is something I talked about a lot during Occupy Wall Street, and why what we were seeing with these protests is actually serious. Even though if you only see a few thousand people, a lot of people I know were like, oh, so what? It's only a few protests during Occupy. That doesn't mean anything. And I'm like, okay, here's the math. You've got around 12 to 13 million in the New York City metro, right?
Sure.
I think.
Let's just we'll go with that. What's 10% of 13 million?
1.3
1.3 million.
Yeah.
Okay. What's 1% of 13 million? It's 130,000 people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There are, I believe, at any given moment, about 10,000 active duty police in New York City. 10,000. I could be wrong because it's been years since I've had this conversation, but I believe there's something like 28,000. There's probably more now since Occupy, but it's like between 28 and like 35,000 police officers in New York City, and only active at a time is only like 10,000. If 0.1% of New York City decided to revolt, 0.1, you've got, 13,000 people. That's more than active duty NYPD. And we're talking about 31% of the population that actually believes a civil war is imminent. Now, of that, group, how many are of the persuasion to engage in a civil conflict?
Right.
Let's say 1% of that. We still now have 0.3%. Or I'm sorry, yeah.
I think the breakdown of that of that 31% is pretty interesting, though. They break it down basically based on who supports Trump and who opposes him. 51% of voters who strongly approve of Trump are very concerned that the opponents of Trump's policies will resort to violence.
One thing that I have mentioned a lot is that when we look back at history, everything is condensed. You read about World War II and you read about these battles and people don't realize how far apart they were, and how to a lot of people in the U.S. the war didn't seem like it was so far away.
So go ahead.
No, just that where we're at right now on a day-to-day basis, a lot of people are becoming complacent. We saw street battles last year. So what is the response of people now? I can't tell you how many people are like, oh, but that's all over. No, that was a sign that people were willing to beat each other in the streets. A guy came out with a gun and shot some Republicans at a baseball game. Before this, a guy went and shot that Democratic politician, right? Somebody said to me, I don't think we're facing a civil war because this is exactly what they said during Occupy Wall Street. It happens every time there's a big protest movement or something like that. And I thought, yeah, but maybe Occupy was the start. It's where we started seeing the really extreme rise and mainstreaming of this regressive identity politics system, massive protests in the street, and the rhetoric from it hasn't gone away. I mean, Alexandria Cortez is like an Occupy candidate, like Bernie Sanders and Cortez very much hold those Occupy ideals. And now you had Bernie, he should have won, in my opinion. I mean, they cheated. I don't know if he would have won, but at least the primary. But now you have Cortez actually winning. So it's like, yeah, what came from Occupy? It's still happening.
What would the goal be for each side? Obviously, the one side would be to overthrow Trump.
Well, it'd be to take over the government.
Right. What would the other?
That's illegally take over the government.
Right.
So
You've got a defensive and offensive position. The Trump side, which is going to have a lot of people with guns, are going to be to defend the Constitution, defend freedom of speech and things like that.
The government would be the good guys.
Well, everybody thinks of the good guys.
Yeah,
Well, I'm saying,
Wait,
look,
hold on.
In charge, they decide.
I don't
They
think there's a good
literally-
guys or a bad guys in the situation, though.
They literally call themselves the resistance. That doesn't mean they're actually like a resistance faction that's going to, plant bombs and kill people in the streets and do, nighttime raids or anything. But it also doesn't mean they won't start doing that at some point. Like, I genuinely believe we might see some insurgency. Where we're at today, if I were to look at everything that happened in the past and make a prediction for the future, I do think there's a high likelihood of seeing insurgency in the next couple of years. However, things can change, right? So in the next month or two, I might change my mind and be like, okay, I was wrong and things calm down. But at least right now, with how extreme things are getting, to the point where you've got Maxine Waters, right? Walters saying, go out and protest these people. You've got articles saying, oh, you're upset you can't eat at a diner. And
it was Waters.
Waters, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, man, this is a country where we're supposed to disagree with each other and be angry with each other and still serve each other that slice of pizza, And now they're saying civility is white supremacy.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, but I really don't think the average person is going to be like...
That's not what we're talking about. Yeah, the average person never wants to be involved.
I think, okay.
The average colonist didn't want a revolution.
No, that's true. But I think whoever starts using violence is going to be the loser.
I disagree.
You also have to consider that you can't really compare it to the previous Civil
Sure.
War.
Right,
Yeah, that's
technology
totally
is
different.
No. But the previous Civil War was a revolution that failed. And it wasn't actually a civil war.
It wasn't even a revolution.
because they failed. They seceded.
No. It was a literal invasion from Union forces into Southern
Well,
territory.
so, I mean, they seceded, and then
Right.
yeah, they were
Yeah,
trying.
I
It was a
mean,
revolution that failed.
It basically started. I could be wrong. I'm not a historian. With Fort Sumter, and
Yeah.
Union forces refused to leave, and they were like, "You're on, sovereign
Southern-
land,"
yeah.
and they said, "Buzz off." And so this scared a bunch of other states into seceding. And then the Union, Lincoln was like, "I am not going to have the Union dissolve on my watch," so
Yeah.
invaded the South.
So it's not going to be like that. It's going to be a fight. A real civil war is two factions fighting for control of the government.
So technically, it's the
Unless
first Civil War.
Unless, like, California secedes, and we have to force them back in with war.
But a real civil war is internal factions
Yeah.
fighting for control,
Yeah,
and that's
so
what's
that's what I'm saying.
what's going on right now. We're just not seeing extreme violence, but we are seeing violence.
Well, Steve King had a tweet recently where he said America's heading in the direction of another Harper's Ferry. After that comes Fort Sumter. And he was talking about Portland occupiers shutting down the ICE office.
Do you want to pull up what Harper's Ferry is?
Yeah.
I skimmed over it. I don't know a lot of the specifics.
So it was a strategic location on the railroad. And at first, that's where John Brown's raid was. And John Brown was an abolitionist who led a group of 21 men in a raid on the arsenal.
Stealing weapons. And
Stealing
stuff.
weapons, yeah.
And so then, after that,
Was
we had
Fort
Fort
Sumter.
Sumter. Yeah. So there's there have been a ton of occupations of ICE offices. And, I have some people saying, but it's just protests, it's not a big deal. And I'm like, yeah, maybe. But with as crazy as things have been, I have to wonder if it's not going to get worse. Like, how will they stem the bleed? Is it just a protest? Is this the end of it? Is there potentially more? Is this going to,
I guess it depends what happens to ICE.
And you know what? I feel like what I was saying before is, right now the government is Trump. Trump is the government. The government is Republican. So anyone who's not Republican trying to change the government would be the enemy of the state. So
well, if they're doing it by force.
Well, that's what I mean. That's the only way it would be a civil war. So once Democrats start attacking Republican politicians, or Republicans start attacking Democrat politicians, there's not really a war.
Well, wasn't there an article about someone threatening the family of a Republican?
Yeah.
You want to grab that real quick?
Let's see.
I think it's something like. I think it's an allegation
yeah.
because I don't know what. Proof
Oh
they
yeah,
have.
I had a bunch of problems with
But
this.
when the guy shot at the baseball game at the politician,
Yeah.
that might be considered the start of the Civil War.
Yeah, but there was that other politician. I can't remember her name. She got shot in the head, I think. Do you remember that?
Yeah, Giffords.
Giffords, right. And the Kennedys get assassinated all the time. Like, how
Yeah.
many Kennedys have been assassinated now?
Not
Like
really
three?
assassinated, though. They died
Yeah,
in plane
well-
crashes by accident.
Yeah, and there was I think three of
Yeah.
them got shot.
The headline is Another Democrat Threatens Republican with Murder, allegedly, of course. A complaint filed with law enforcement accuses Key of calling Mast's offices in Washington, D.C. and saying to the intern who took the call, "I'm going to find the congressman's kids and kill them. If you're going to separate kids at the border, I'm going to kill his kids. Don't try to find me because you won't." The intern then reported the call, and the FBI was contacted to investigate.
This is just one example, and I'm sure these things have happened throughout history. Death threats and threats to people's family and all that stuff. So, again, none of this is necessarily indicative of a coming civil war.
She says, one question, what's it going to take to get the Democrats to stop trying to kill Republicans?
That's just extremely hyperbolic.
Yeah.
Doesn't the article say he dropped his "I'm with her" hat right before he said it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The two defining hats of the Civil War.
I'm with her and make America great again. No, I don't think there are I'm with her hats, are there? I'm sure there are, but
If
I
they're
don't
not,
wear
I
them.
should sell some.
So here's what I'm seeing right now. We've got it seems like the Dems are just totally what was crazy to me is during the 2016 election in the primary we had 3 people.
Yeah.
It was Martin O'Malley, was that
Lincoln Chafee, Martin O'Malley,
Bernie Sanders and Hillary.
And
And it was basically just Bernie and Hillary. Who the hell are those other guys,
Right.
And I'm wondering, why were there, 17 people on the Republican stage?
Oh, because there were so many conflicting values and...
Kind of. Half the people were criticizing each other for, such stupid minutia. I'm like, dude, you guys agree on everything. What are you arguing
Right.
about? It was a battle of charisma. But then when you look at the Democrat stage with Hillary and Bernie, it's dramatically different. So now, look at what happened with... Actually, let's talk about the Ocasio-Cortez upset in New York, because this is really interesting. I could be wrong. I just was skimming through the story. But I believe she won with 15,000 votes.
That's so low considering.
There's 700,000 people.
That's insane.
In District 14. That's ridiculous.
Did she pull a Trump where she motivated typical non-voters?
That's what she's saying.
Yeah.
You know, pull a Trump. That's a funny. When she went on Colbert, they said, Colbert asked, he was like, you were down, I think like 36 points, and then you ended 15 points up. That's a 51-point upset. How did you do that? And she said, too many people, these people are focused on who they think is going to vote instead of getting people to vote. And that's what they did. And then they actually made a joke, like kind of about how we know the polls are wrong. Yeah, Trump, he won. Mm-hmm. He did the same thing. When Trump was running, people kept talking about these districts that were lighting up with people who normally don't vote, who are deciding to vote now. Mm-hmm. And that's what made Trump happen. I think that might be why kind of the left and the right are so different today than they were in the past elections, because the voter base has kind of rotated.
Yeah.
And now, I think because of Bernie, we have a ton of far left who are, campaigning and advocating for these Democratic seats and positions. And so one of the things I tweeted out is, if the mainstream left is as far left as possible already, there's nowhere else to go. And that means the more they push crazy rhetoric like abolish ICE and no borders,
nothing's going to get done.
They're going to bleed. No, they're going to bleed all their supporters.
Yeah.
People are always like, somebody posted a video I made on like the Sam Harris subreddit calling me a right winger, and there's an argument over whether or not I'm a right winger, and I'm like, I post my political opinions and my leanings all the time. I'm a social liberal.
It doesn't matter because you only criticize the left, right?
But I don't even only.
No, I know.
Like I had a video just recently where I criticized the left for freaking out over Kennedy, and criticized the right for being snooty elitists, like gloating over how much smarter. Oh, we're winning, and I said, the left is freaking out and being really abusive towards this guy, the 81-year-old man who wants to retire, but the right is doing basically what the left was doing, in 2015, laughing and gloating about how much smarter they are and how they can't stop winning. And I'm like, don't be sore winners, don't gloat. But somebody comments on that video like, why don't you ever criticize the right? I'm like, dude, do you even watch my videos?
No, obviously they don't.
But here's what I said. I posted it to Twitter. There's a reason why I very heavily criticize the right. I don't pay the left. There's a reason why I very heavily criticize the left, and it's because I'm not paying attention to the right. I don't watch Ben Shapiro's, videos. I don't listen to his podcast. I don't go to the Daily Wire. I go to CNN. I go to the New York Times. I'm on Vox Mashable. I worked at Vice. So when I'm focused on the places where I am and the people who are a part of what I used to think was like my political faction, I'm like, whoa, you guys are crazy. And so think about the results of this. If Alexandria Cortez is what we're pushing towards, and she wants like universal health care, universal school, free jobs, abolish ICE. Like, those are extreme positions for me. I agree. I'm like close to Bernie Sanders, but not that far. But I like him better than Hillary. But if the options are socialism, democratic socialism, or a moderate Republican, what do you think the average person is going to choose? They're going to be like, well, that person's really far away from me. They're extreme. This person I kind of don't agree with, but they're close enough. So there's this war reporter, Chris Hedges. He's a Pulitzer Prize winner, and he's on the left. He's an anti-Trump guy. I don't think he's ridiculously far left. I think he's more of like a Bernie Sanders kind of like social democrat, where they're capitalist but for social programs. And he wrote this article in Common Dreams about how he's like, it's coming, it's here. Do you want to pull up some of the excerpts?
I mean, it's a really interesting piece. It's on Common Dreams. And I like Chris Hedges because he's pretty straightforward and doesn't really pull punches. He's critical of both the left and the right, and he really takes a lot of time to disavow the left's violence. But in this piece, he basically talks about how this has been kind of a long time coming. Yeah. And he says the problem is not Trump. It is a political system dominated by corporate power and the mandarins of the two major political parties, in which we don't count. We will wrest back political control by dismantling the corporate state, and this means massive and sustained civil disobedience, like that demonstrated by teachers around the country this year. If we do not stand up, we will enter a new dark age. I think he's onto something there. He's not calling for violence. He is talking about like an uprooting
civil
of this.
Disobedience is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what I think is particularly interesting is that he talks about how he's been to all of these countries just before they've collapsed. and the signs are here.
Yeah, he says, as a foreign correspondent, I've covered collapsed societies, including the former Yugoslavia. It is impossible for any doomed population to grasp how fragile the decayed financial, social, and political system is on the eve of implosion. All of the harbingers of collapse are visible: crumbling infrastructure, chronic underemployment and unemployment, the indiscriminate use of lethal force by police, political paralysis and stagnation, an economy built on scaffolding of debt, nihilistic mass shootings in schools, universities, workplaces, malls, concert venues, and movie theaters, opioid overdoses that kill some 64,000 people a year, an epidemic of suicides, unsustainable military expansion, gambling as a desperate tool of economic development and government revenue,
Oh my God,
the
seriously.
capture of power by a tiny, corrupt clique, censorship, the physical diminishing of public institutions ranging from schools and libraries to courts and medical facilities, the incessant bombardment.
Yeah, okay.
No, it's,
What? I mean,
it's
how
good.
much longer is this?
All right, I guess people can go read it themselves.
Yeah,
it's
that's-
definitely
that's-
worth
that's
reading.
getting pretty wordy, Mr.
But I
Hitchens.
think he's
But I want to point something out. It's never been less violent. Crime is dramatically down. Lethal incidents are dramatically down. Things have never been better. But the media is reporting on things more and more and more. And there are more and more media outlets and individuals. So that's why I was saying in the beginning of this, maybe we, like, I fully believe we are part of the problem by even talking about it.
absolutely. I think it's irresponsible for these news outlets to be
And us.
glorifying the Civil War. I mean, I'm talking about how I think it's irresponsible. I don't really think it's going to happen like in the same way that they do. I think civil disobedience is one thing, but calling for it to get more extreme like they did in Splinter, that's
talking about
irresponsible.
bombings.
That's irresponsible.
Also, I think we're talking about it from an outside perspective, whereas the media says, "Oh, look, a black person was shot. Report it." You know, like, and they focus on stuff to incite people.
Oh, before
while we're
even-
just kind of taking a look at
Yeah.
it. You know, it's
Well, I think here's the thing. There was a video earlier that's been going viral a couple days ago where there's a black man and the police are searching for a suspect who is said to be chasing people with a baseball bat. And they tell this guy to sit down, cross his legs, put his hands up. The guy does it, and then the cop just walks up behind him and then shoots him in the back with a taser. Yeah,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
that's some effed up S. I can't. I'm trying not to swear because we're on YouTube. But what happens is people see that. And yes, it's a problem. Yes, it should be talked about. Yes, that officer should get in trouble for tasing a guy who was following orders. But people are going to see that and then assume that is all life, all the time, everywhere. You know, they assume that the exception is the rule. They say, oh, here it is again. This proves it. And it's like, actually, violent incidents have been going down like crazy. So if anything, if there's going to be a civil war, it's the fault of the media for, you know, so I think this kind of absolves us of some responsibility by bringing up the fact that it may just be crazy BS, and by acknowledging the fact that violence is going down and people shouldn't go crazy, hopefully this will kind of capture people who are worried about it, who seek out media stories about it, and then we can kind of, say, calm down a little bit. We don't think it's going to get that bad. But by all means, I think people should be prepared. I'm
Yeah.
not saying build a bunker and load up on
Right.
ammo, but, you know, have some water, have a couple gallons of water, have some food.
I think at first you might have come off a little alarmist, but yeah, that walks it back a little bit.
Alarmist in, like, the beginning?
Yeah.
Well, I personally do think we're going to see insurgency, right? These things that are talking about civil war are making people imagine, like, armed factions running through the streets, like Syria. No, maybe not for 5 years. I personally do think we're heading in that direction. It could change. Something could happen. There's a lot of variables. It's nearly infinite amount of variables. But I do think we're at the point where we're probably going to see some bombings. Okay, so we've seen religious bombings. There was one in Manhattan just last year. But we do have this guy in, I think, was it Texas, who tried blowing up a statue. Mm-hmm. So people have already started, we've started on that path. We've had Molotov cocktails. We've had fires. We've had people beaten in the streets. We're already there. We're beyond that threshold. So what's the next position? I'm surprised with all of the rhetoric we've seen about ICE, we haven't seen any crazy action. People are posting photos of the Holocaust next to photos of ICE and telling people it's the same thing. They're telling people that a combat wounded Marine veteran has a Nazi tattoo on his elbow, and they believe it, and they share this like crazy.
Oh, that was messed up.
Right. So it's not so much about what's actually going on in terms of violence. It's not so much what's actually going on in the streets in terms of, racism and police brutality. It's the fact that people think it's worse than ever. And that's what matters. Mm-hmm. Do people think there's a problem that can't be solved and they need to solve it? Yes.
And
in which case...
Who's telling them that there's a problem?
Yeah, the media was whacking off the ad revenue.
Yeah, exactly. And they're pushing people in extremes. And unless we stop them from making these extremes even more extreme, it will. So basically, the media is in control of this war.
I think the narrative about civil war is coming from a point of we need to be more extreme. So one of the examples I give to people is a news outlet 4 years ago says, "Is Donald Trump racist?" and then talks about why they think he is. Well, they get a ton of hits on it. They say, "Hey, we want to do that again." But you already asked the question, what can you do? Well, let's say he is racist. So then they make another article, Donald Trump is racist. They have to keep escalating that article until it gets to the point where they go, is Donald Trump fascist? Is he friends with fascists? Is he fascist himself? Is he worse? Is he close to being Hitler? Is he Hitler? Is he worse than Hitler? And then finally, Trump is worse than Hitler.
No, and then finally, we should start a civil war.
Right. No, and that's where we're at now with Splinter.
Yeah, exactly.
This is just the beginning. People should pay attention to history. There were thousands of bombings in the 70s, and it should get more extreme.
I'm just curious, what are they going to do? Tell their audience to arm themselves?
James Woods already did.
Yeah,
but I'm
but
talking about the other side.
Yeah. So there's this artist called Jim Bob, and his Instagram is made by Jim Bob, and he does really funny satirical one panel cartoons, and he has this really good one of two far left people looking at each other, and one says this country is fascist, and then the other one says we need to ban guns.
Yeah. That's one of the things that's always been so crazy to me is that at the same time that people are saying Donald Trump is fascist, the Republicans are fascist, I'll take this opportunity to bring up CrowdPack, which is a crowdfunding platform for grassroots politicians, just banned all Republicans. So we're at a point where, you can't, if you're a Republican, you can't fundraise on their platform anymore. We're at a point where the divide is so extreme where they're like, Republicans are fascists. And then they go, we should empower the federal government to take everyone's guns away. Mm-hmm. Right. So you think there's a fascist in power, and you want to give him your only means of defying him.
Yeah, have fun overthrowing that.
Who created fascism? Was it Mussolini or?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right, and one of his policies would take away guns, right?
I'm pretty sure. I'm not a historian,
Yeah, me neither, but...
I read something really smart that maybe not really smart, but really interesting, where we constantly hear people say that the Second Amendment is to protect the American people, to protect themselves from tyrannical government. The response on the left is, like a gun, like an AR-15 is going to protect you from a Scud missile, or a fighter jet or a bomber, and then the left laughs about it, saying, "Haha, see, it's a stupid argument." But then I saw this post on the internet where they were like, the U.S. in all its technological and militaristic might was defeated in Vietnam, is pushed back relentlessly in Afghanistan, in Iraq, time and time again. Small amounts of people with nothing but rifles have won against technological superiority. And they made some really good points. A fighter jet isn't going to enforce a curfew on street corners. A tank isn't going to be able to stop people from posting flyers or marching through the streets. A person with a gun is going to be able to do it. And that's why an individual with a gun is so powerful. I'll give people a really good example. If you've never played Warcraft, the original, or Command & Conquer, these are overhead view strategy games where basically you cut trees down or mine Tiberium and use those resources to generate military power. And the goal is to defeat your enemies. In the game, you can level up your technology and get better weapons, and you can get the ultimate weapon.
Which is a nuclear weapon, right?
Well, for the Nod, right? So the Nod are the bad guys in Command & Conquer, and you get a nuclear missile.
Yeah.
But the GDI, which is I think it's GDI, they're like the good guys, they get the low orbit ion cannon. This is the ultimate technological weapon. And once it powers up, you can just select anywhere on the map, and a gigantic laser beam blows it up. And guess what? You can still easily defeat anyone who has maximum technology by mass producing the lowest level infantry and just sending them nonstop over to your opponent. And there's been complaints about it in terms of gameplay. People are like, it's so dumb that you can do that. Just make, 300 little level 1 guys who are weak and worthless, but that distributed force wins.
Well, that's why China would probably beat any other country in a...
That's why I'm so angry with people who are like, white people are still powerful. I'm like, dude, China's ground army is more than double the size of ours.
In America, where it's European culture, and of course America's going to have European culture. It was started that way.
There's still arguments to be made about general who is better at what, because it's nuanced in this country. Like Asians are doing better in exams and
because people
entry
are
and-
different, right? Different races
Cultures.
different cultures are different. Yeah.
I mean,
Cultures.
I think there are.
It's not the
there-
race; it's the culture.
There are
Yeah.
obvious differences between races, like people have different colored hair and skin and things like that.
It's
and I-
negligible compared to in
Culture.
China. They teach math predominantly over language. That's
Right.
why to them you're supposed to teach your kid math from a baby. That's why.
presumably.
That's
And,
why
it's
they're
not,
better.
and we're not stereotyping because we have a Korean mom.
Yeah, and she taught us math.
And she makes math tutorial videos on YouTube.
Pretty sure in India it's math too.
But regardless, North Korea's got got a massive ground army. I don't know about the larger, but they have one of the largest. India has one of the largest. And it's so strange when people are like, it takes one nuclear missile and we can wipe out that ground army. It's like, no, you can't. Those people are spread out over like hundreds of thousands of square miles. What's a nuke going to do? Like, 20 square miles or not even 10 square miles?
Yeah, and all it takes is a
Depending on
couple
size, yeah.
couple
Yeah.
tunnels if they
Wasn't
get
the big-
down.
the biggest one was only like 250 miles or something. I don't
Was
remember.
Sarbama?
Yeah.
And that was only like quarter capacity or something. I saw a website that like a standard nuclear weapon would wipe out something like Midtown Manhattan from the East River to the Hudson, but it would leave most of Manhattan totally fine. Like I think
Radiated?
Yeah, the fallout is what you have to worry about.
and the fault's on purpose in a lot of
Yeah.
these weapons. They want the radiation. There's a thing that's called the multiple independently targeted reentry vehicle. It's a single warhead that can drop something like 8 to 12 different nuclear payloads. So one of these can do it. Can really
8 nukes.
wipe out eastern cities. But the point is, if China just sent a crap ton of boats with millions of people straight towards our shores,
That's a lot of boats.
we could blow up a ton of them. Yeah, it is a lot of boats. And we could blow up a ton of them. Planes could fly by, shoot at them. They shoot back, right? They're going to have countermeasures. If they landed 1 million people in California, they'd take loss. 1 million people? How many cops are in LA? 10,000?
Yeah,
Look
but
10,000?
I
Look
don't
at World War II Normandy Beach. How did we
Yeah.
take that? Right, men. We dropped them on the beach, getting murdered,
Yeah.
Yep.
Just
and
mowed
said,
down.
"Get to the
Yep.
bunkers.
Charge in, take it over.
Yeah.
And we pushed, like, Germany controlled all that, and we were like, it's ours now.
Right. But even if they landed in California, I don't think they'd get past probably the Southwest.
I think you're wrong.
No,
I think you're totally
'cause-
wrong. They have nukes. We have nukes. It's like, so what are we going to do? We're going to nuke our own country if they invaded us?
Yeah.
They'll nuke back.
Yeah. Oh, God.
They're going to have They're going to have an air force. They're going to have tanks. They have aircraft carriers. The point I'm trying to make is,
But I'm talking about, like, they wouldn't be able to get a ground army, like, past mountain ranges and...
Yeah,
why not?
Well, I mean, eventually, but we'd be able to cut them off
With what?
with artillery.
And they don't have artillery?
They would do training missions in Mexico with the Mexican government, and then
Yeah,
bring in
and
a crazy
they-
ton of
Yeah,
troops,
no,
and we
they-
would be suspicious.
the
No,
point is-
they could totally ally with Mexico.
The point is, it's silly to assume who's going to win a war when there's tons of confidential information and everything. The point I'm trying to make is a ground army is dramatically more powerful than people realize. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that it takes only a very tiny amount of people to decide to start an insurgency to actually destabilize the entire country. I mean, look, what was that documentary about the guy who dressed up like a bat to fight crime? And the other guy put on the mask and then raided the stock exchange. Look how much damage that... I'm kidding. That was Batman. I'm joking.
Yeah.
But seriously, 50 people. 50 people is all it would take to shut down the New York Stock Exchange, to storm in guns a-blazing. You're probably going to die. But what if 1,000 people showed up in downtown Manhattan, financial district, and cleared a path, secured the streets, and then a bunch of people went in and just wiped out the stock exchange?
Like, wiped out. What do you
Like,
mean?
just started, like, shooting stuff and breaking computers and just, like, destroying
and
everything.
recruiting people.
No, like people, like I'm not saying they kill people. I'm saying they want to destroy the stock exchange,
Yeah.
not cause like personal harm. What are the police going to do? You've got 1,000 armed people, and 1,000 people. What? That's 0.007% of New York's population. Like when we talk the 3%ers, for example, they get their name based off the fact that they believe only 3% of the colonists fought in the Revolutionary War. I think there's some contradictory information that it was actually like 15%, one of the highest percentages for any war or something. But they say it's 3%. And it is true that most colonists didn't want to have a revolution. It was a minority that were like, let's declare independence. And they did. And then kind of, there you go. Now all of a sudden the British are coming over, and it's like you're a traitor. Who are you siding with? You don't side with the right faction, someone's going to kill you. Are you a loyalist? Great. Well, then, if the rebels find out, now you're a bad guy. Are you a rebel yourself? Okay, now the redcoats are going to find out, and you're a bad guy. I think ultimately, I don't know, insurgency. Maybe in a few years we'll see some dramatic change. But I will add that all of this talk about abolishing ICE, I think is today. If you were to ask me today, based on what's happened today, I think Donald Trump will be reelected. I think if he runs in 2020, which he might not, because some people are saying, he's not going to do it. He wants to get everything done in 4 years. Who knows? But like when they're talking about no borders, you've got protesters holding up signs saying no borders. What do you think the average American thinks when they see that?
Do you see the tweet I retweeted? I forget who it's from, but it says Trump re-election rally unbeknownst to the protesters, and they're holding a no border sign.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna get rid of borders. Like, why? What?
Yeah, I think if things were to kick off Civil War style, I think it would be after Trump gets reelected. Because even just thinking about how intense the fighting and everything was after he was initially elected, and then people are like, what the?
Or
4 more years of this?
Or if in September, Trump chooses a new Supreme Court justice to replace Kennedy, and then shortly after they overturn Roe v. Wade.
Oof, I really don't think they would.
Yeah,
I don't think they would.
Yeah, that's medically a bad idea.
Like
it doesn't matter.
A bunch of Republicans are like, that's settled law as far as
sure.
You don't go back on.
If a lot of people on the left are saying we can't let them do this because they will, right?
Right. Oh yeah, the rhetoric. Yeah.
In which case, will that scare them into action now? Maybe not, right? I'll say this then. What if Trump gets reelected? Ginsburg is 85.
Yeah.
Is Trump going to pick 3 justices?
Poof.
There's another guy who's 79. So what? He'll be in 2 more years. He's going to be 81. Ginsburg's going to be 87. Trump might actually be able to pick 4 Supreme Court justices if he is reelected. Not only that, he's still got, it's only 2018. He's still got until 2020, and Ginsburg's 85, and the other dude's I don't know the other guy's name, but he's 79. What's going to happen in the next year? I mean, Ginsburg already had pancreatic cancer. She's just had a stent put in her heart.
Is she the one who retired?
No, Kennedy is. Ginsburg's still on. But if something happens to her, Trump will get a third chance to appoint a Supreme Court justice, and then the deck's stacked. Ginsburg's like liberal, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So then, boom, liberals out, conservative in. Now it's a slanted court. You've got 6-3.
But it's an
guaranteed.
old mentality from years ago.
But she's still liberal. Trump's going to put in a 40-year-old who's going to be on the court for 30 plus years, and it's going to be totally conservative. If Ginsburg ends up leaving, I think she said she's going to serve until she's dead or something.
Do you think he would be that unfair about it though? Do you think he would only?
I'm doing air quotes when I say he'll be fair.
Well,
he'll find somebody who's just liberal enough to be like, see, I'm being fair.
Why would he do that?
Because why would anyone give up power to people they don't like?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Why would he? If I were him, I would pick someone exactly like me.
Right, what I'm saying
he's
pretending to bring on someone who's
I would
moderate.
tell them to pretend to be moderate.
Yeah, exactly. And then
he's
he's going to
moderate,
stack
and I'll
the
pick
deck.
you.
But just think about look, that's all possible in his first term. Man, what a crazy circumstance.
I don't think the right cares that much about Roe versus Wade, though.
The right?
I think the old right did. The new right
Yeah,
doesn't.
exactly.
Yeah,
the new right.
With the new flood of atheists into the right because they've been shunned by the left.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
There's a lot of atheists.
That's why I think that's because so many Republicans are like, it's settled, let's not go there. I really don't think we'd have to worry about it.
But I wouldn't be surprised. Here's the thing. Do you think Trump will be reelected?
If you asked me a week ago, before Cortez won and before, DSAs were picking up more steam. Ah, man, I still don't even want to answer this, but...
Go ahead.
No.
Yes or no? Just simple answer.
I'm just saying nothing's out of the question.
What is
because
that? What does that mean? Nothing's out of the question.
Before I would say no. No, before I would say I don't think he would be reelected. He's too divisive. Now I think there is a chance because with everyone, well, not everyone, with the left going further left and kind of pushing out people who care about immigration and other things who aren't willing to go that far left yet, then I think he would have a chance.
Where do I go? Right. I know. That I think. I think Reactor and I might have slightly different politics. I know Emily and I have fairly similar politics.
Slightly.
I mean, I'm
But-
further to the left than you, but
Yeah, but we're pretty much in the same place. Social liberalism.
I mean, you're.
Oh, you're a social libertarian, right?
I don't like labels, but
That's
I'm
what your 8 values said. Anyway, the point is, I like the idea of some level of equality in markets. I like the idea of regulation. The right are people who say cut taxes, deregulate, right? Well, I don't agree with that. I don't want to vote for those people. But what do I have? What are my options on the left? Corporatist, crony Hillary Clinton types or socialists? I don't want to dissolve the borders of this country. I like America. I've been around the world. I have seen horrifying things. There's this ridiculous article from Huffington Post. It's actually just regurgitating some Reuters poll that claims the United States is as bad as Syria in terms of sexual violence against women. It's this list of the top 10 countries that are the worst for women, and it said the U.S. is number 3. And I commented, this is psychotic. Someone said, what do you mean it's psychotic? It's a poll. And I said, in Qatar, or Qatar, however you pronounce it, if a woman gets raped, she will go to prison.
Yeah.
You want to talk about sexual violence against women in I think in the Emirates as well, in Saudi Arabia, in Dubai, you can Google this. I am not making this up. Women who were raped reported their rape and then went to prison for extramarital sex. And you want to talk about the U.S. being dangerous for women. So anyway, back to the point. What are my options as somebody who is a liberal, who wants to see some, I think on the 8 values chart, I'm like 54% in favor of equality and 46% in favor of free market, because I do believe that we need regulation and oversight and things like that, but I'm fairly centrist on the issue. Who do I vote for? The guys who want to cut taxes and deregulate, which for the most part I disagree with, or the more extreme option of, hey, we're going to enact some kind of socialist policies that don't work and can't be funded and dissolve your borders. Yeah, I'm not voting for that.
Yeah.
Well,
What am I supposed to do?
Ridiculous idea. And it's funny because it's the opposite of the wall.
Right?
yeah.
Trump's like, I'm going to build a wall. And they were like, no borders at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is also bad. I'm like, it's dumb.
So
Trump, you're an idiot for wanting to build a wall, but we're smart for wanting to get rid of borders. Yeah, go ahead.
So obviously that would, I don't think, well, I mean, obviously the wall isn't happening. If you put some DSA people in there who say no borders, that's not going to happen either. But would that force them to come to some kind of compromise?
Everyone's going crazy.
You also have to think about the next election. I think Trump does have his fan base that still is glad they voted for him the first time. He might have picked up some new ones, but also you have to consider Trump isn't the reason he won. The reason he won is because the Democratic Party created a war inside themselves.
Oh, yeah.
And pushed their own voters out.
But it's not just that.
cheating.
I was thinking about how did it come to the fact that there were so many people in the Democratic Party who didn't want Hillary and wanted Bernie when their politics are very different. It's the media. The left-wing media has been pushing so hard to more extreme positions that the average person who identifies as left now has ridiculous positions like no borders. So then they go to the Dems and say no borders, and the Dems, rightly so, are like, that's insane, we can't do that. People don't want that. You people are nuts. So what happens? That faction of media-obsessed extremists who are made that way because of the psychotic rhetoric from these media outlets, like the U.S. is the 3rd most dangerous country for women, it's crazy, are now like, we need DSA. We need no borders. We need to let everybody in. California's a sanctuary state. Like, my God. What people don't realize is, I say it's very simple. Imagine you live with roommates and you all pay an even share of rent, right?
Yeah.
You've got 10 roommates in a big loft, and you each pay $100 a month to pay for your loft. And then on the first of the month you pay, everybody pays. And then come the 17th, someone just walks in your house and starts living in there. And you're like, hey, we all paid to maintain this place, and then they run and hide.
Or they kick the basement window in, and you find out they're living in your basement.
Right, exactly. And then the argument is from the left is like, a house is different from a country. And it's like, that's not the point I'm trying to make. Obviously, that's true. The point I'm trying to make is that resources are finite.
Yeah, exactly.
And there was one, I watched some video where a guy goes, but we have a lot of land. And I'm like, okay, are you saying put illegal immigrants on undeveloped land in unincorporated America? Like, I don't entirely disagree with that. If we
horrible,
right.
but
if we want to start building cities and create new urban centers, hey, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
But what's happening is you're creating. So there's a lot of problems with illegal immigration, the strain on local economies, the inflation that it causes. There are some benefits, but people don't consider that there's a fear among immigrants, people who come here illegally, that they'll get caught. So we have a lot of hit and runs. They get into a car accident, they flee. They don't get insurance. Mm-hmm. Whatever the stats are, I don't want to get into the extreme nuance of it because I'm not an expert. What I can say is there's a simple, basic economic principle that our economy grows so fast, and that means here's another basic premise: every step you take on sidewalk is wear and tear on the sidewalk. Our infrastructure is crumbling already. Our bridges are falling apart. You want to add, thousands more people to the load of those bridges, to those roads, to our water systems, to our power plants, to our infrastructure in general. That's going to create more strain. Our economy has to grow gradually with our citizens, not with people just coming here. The other problem is that there's a reason people come here. It's good. It's a good place to be. We have civil liberties. We have a great economy where we make decent money. And if they all leave their own country, then their countries won't flourish. There won't be economic growth there. And then all it will do is strain our economy. So legal immigration works perfectly. You know why? We can account for it. Mm-hmm. And then our economy can grow and everyone can flourish. But just saying open borders, let everybody come, yeah. Do you know what happens when you allow a species to flood into a certain area? It's called an invasive species. I'm not trying to say this as a derogatory term for migrants. An invasive species comes into, like Lake Michigan, we had the mussel problem. A bunch of mussels were moving into the lake. Mm-hmm. They eat too much, they grow too rapidly, and then the environment collapses.
Humans are the invasive species. The most
in various places.
No, the whole world. We've invaded the entire world.
Yep. So people, you need to realize, think about yeast. Eventually it dies. It grows to the point where it's consumed all the sugar in its vessel and then releases carbon dioxide and it's gone. We need to plan out how our economies work to an extent, right? That's me as a liberal. We need some kind of planning to our economies, and just opening the floodgates would result in a rapid expansion of consumption of our economy into the point where it just ceases. So we need to regulate that. So back to my main point. Who do I vote for? Do I vote for the cronies, the Hillary Clintons?
Whoever's the least corrupt, it seems.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't trust any of them. That's why. Why I didn't
politicians.
Like any of them.
It's all a BS game, so that they can try tricking people into vote. It's who can I trick them? Who can trick the most people into voting for you?
And that's why Gillibrand and De Blasio, in my opinion, are like, we need to abolish ICE. Yeah, you don't really think that.
And then turn and say, but we'll just, we'll make a couple changes.
Look, even if you're the most, even if you're the most good-hearted politician to ever exist, you're gonna have to lie if you want to win.
Yeah. Well, I'll put it this way. You can be a good-hearted, honest politician. You're not going to win.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
You have to lie to get in. Then you can do what you want.
Well, it's because it's a sick game. But I mean, look at what happens now in general. How many articles said that Jordan Peterson's fans are the alt-right when the alt-right hates him? How many articles have come out saying that Sargon and Dankula are hard right or far right alt-right people when they're literally on the left? Because the media will lie about you. So you can be a good person. You can be a good politician. And then what happens? Some paper comes out about Bernie Sanders saying that he wrote like a pro-rape thing in college. But you remember that?
Yeah, it was satire though, wasn't it?
I don't know. The point is, like, they're going to dig stuff about you. You're not perfect. They're going to call you out, and they're going to blow this stuff up to the point where you can't escape it, and your only option is to play ball. And Bernie Sanders did. I liked Bernie Sanders way more in the beginning, but then he started espousing this ridiculous rhetoric. He went up on stage and says, if you're white, you don't know what it's like to be poor. Yeah, that's insane, dude.
Yeah.
And I like him more than the rest of them, but that's why I didn't vote for him.
It's like holding your middle finger up to poor people.
No, it's because he thought that's what he needed to say.
Yeah, I know.
Bernie Sanders doesn't really believe that. Come on, you got to be crazy to think there's no poor white people in this country.
Yeah.
We have the Simpsons have been on for what, almost 3 decades, and they got the slack-jawed Cletus. Yeah, we know hillbillies.
Even the
exist.
Simpsons aren't very wealthy.
Well, they're middle class, but the idea is like they don't live in
the
slum. Yeah. Yeah, he's a safety inspector for a nuclear power plant. Dude's making money.
Yeah.
Plus, like, how often does he work odd jobs?
Even though he shouldn't.
He was an astronaut, dude. The guy's got bank.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that dude has way too many jobs. And Peter Griffin, for instance, also super wealthy.
You notice how easy it is for Homer to become an astronaut, though?
Yeah.
Because he's
white
white.
Privilege. Well, not in that universe. They're all yellow. So I guess, are they Asian or something?
No, but they have black
One
people.
of my favorite jokes is when Peter keeps getting like the Petermobile, the Peter copter, and then Cleveland's like, how can you afford all? Or I think it was Joe. He's like, how do you afford all of these things? Yeah, I can't remember what he said. Something like winning a lawsuit or something. But anyway, the point is Bernie Sanders said a bunch of really dumb things. He said women should be paid the same as men in this country. And it's like, yeah, we have like 3 laws, I think, that make it illegal not to do that. What are you proposing, Bernie? Or are you just making stupid rhetoric? Granted, I think Hillary was way worse. That's the thing, you know. But I don't know. I guess what I've been frustrated with lately and looking at this conflict between whatever these factions are is that because the left is screaming about the right and the right is screaming about the left, the moderate left is sitting there scratching their heads like, who do we have left? You know? Who can I vote for that is remotely close to what I believe in? There's nobody.
You know what? The most centered politician is probably going to win.
I don't think so.
Well, because they can pull from both sides.
No, they can't. Well, so look, how many...
The intelligent people who aren't going extremist.
Yeah, and also I think there's a point to where all of the folks who aren't usually voting, who got Trump in, they're going to be like, oh, Trump's going to win, and then maybe they won't vote again.
Yeah, that
what's bothering me is that whenever someone says, like, oh, Tim's conservative now, I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, literally disagree with all of these positions. Like, I could argue with Ben Shapiro day and night. I'm not saying I'd be right or you know, or wrong necessarily. Like, we could debate our opinions on issues and why we think they should be. But I don't agree with the guy on most of his ideas, economically, religiously.
What is Ben Shapiro?
He's a conservative. He's a conservative. He doesn't like Trump. That's the point I'm trying to make, is that even in the realm of like moderate conservatives, I do not agree with their policies. I'm not going to vote for or support them. In which case, I feel like I'm watching people think they're conservative simply because they don't support the authoritarian left. When the left is like, everything you do is racist, period, bow down to me. And they go, yeah, I'm not left, I'm going to go somewhere else. It's like, no, dude, you can still be left and not want authoritarians controlling your ideals, you know? And so I feel like I'm sitting here watching people who I would normally agree with, my friends, either go crazy and start supporting authoritarian dogma, or be like, I guess I was never left, and abandon it and start voting for people who are conservative out of fear of the authoritarian left. Yeah, the left needs to clean house. Eric Weinstein just said this on the Rubin Report. He's like, you know, the left needs to take care of their crazies, the right needs to take care of their crazies, and they should be self-policing. And I agree with that. But whether or not any of that means there will be a civil war, that's a whole other issue. So we've been going for about an hour, a little bit over an hour, so I guess we can, you know, get down to some final thoughts if you have any before you wrap up.
I think it's going to take a while. I mean,
10 years.
A third of people think in the next 5 years it's possible. I guess we're going to have to see what happens with the midterms and then re-election, whether that happens or not. But I don't know. I would say it's possible. And not traditional.
Probable?
I wouldn't say it would be a traditional like civil war. I don't think we're going to have like actual militaries, but I think you would have like guerrilla forces.
Insurgency.
Yeah.
Bombings, beatings.
And I would think that we're already definitely in a civil war. How far that civil war goes is a question of time.
Yeah. Maybe the left gets so crazy it burns itself out. Mm-hmm. You know? I mean, it's not the right isn't crazy, but the crazy rights are ostracized even by the right.
Or maybe
you know?
We'll have a rebirth for the people who don't want to go to either extreme and then just be like, okay, well, let's just wipe this clean and start something new.
What if all the extremists kill each other? And we're left with moderates.
Just let them take out all of their.
There's a few things I want to
energy.
point out. I think Jefferson said something along the lines of a government must be purged every like 200 years or something. But so I don't know if specifically something to that effect. But I'm also pretty sure, isn't it like every empire has not lasted more than 200 years?
No. Well, no. I would say Rome lasted for at least 300.
Yeah,
no,
right. So are we old?
I think
is
our
empire old inside?
I think it is.
But those empires don't change as much as we do with amendments and stuff like that. And we have advanced a lot in civil rights.
Yeah.
From back then, it's like we're changing.
Well, I guess I'll end with one simple truth that can help make all of your lives better. If 31% of these people believe that there could be a civil war in the next 5 years, start a company that sells emergency gear. Because you've got a big market right there. That's 100 million people who want to buy equipment from you, who are scared of a civil war. Oh, man, you can sell tents and flashlights, emergency rations. I'll tell you what. Anyway, thanks for hanging out and listening. I don't know if I'm right or wrong. All I know is I'm probably in a bubble, and the average person's probably too busy watching Family Guy to care about any of this. But let me know. You can comment below if you're watching on YouTube. We do the podcast every Sunday at 4 p.m. It's also up on iTunes and soon to be Google Play. It's not on Google Play, is it?
No.
It will be soon. So if you want to follow me, I'm on Twitter at Timcast, and I'm also youtube.com/Timcast. Do you guys want to mention your social media before we split up?
Yeah, I'm also on Twitter at momesmolly, MOMESMOLLI.
And I'm on Twitter as It's Reactor, ITSREACTOR, and I'm also on YouTube as Reactor. And I just came out with a video explaining how I made a fake news hoax. So if you guys want to check that out, head over to my channel and check it out.
Yeah, Reactor basically does the exact opposite of me, producing fake news as like comedy.
I'm a satirical. I like making people look like idiots for being shitty journalists.
It's easy to do, isn't it?
Yep. All right. Thanks for hanging out, listening, and watching, and I will see you either tomorrow on YouTube or next week.